The Entrepreneurship Art episode that you're about to watch is unedited and uncut. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your preferred podcast platform for the edited version. Enjoy. Yeah, I haven't figured out my podcasting or video setup yet. What I think I'm going to do, I don't know, like legally, if I'm allowed to go to my office, even though I've still been paying rent on it for the past 3 months. But I went yesterday to check it out, and I was like, there was only like maybe 60% occupancy at my office anyway, because they had a bunch of like all of their single person office spaces were filled up, but they had a bunch of like 5 or 6 person office spaces that were just vacant because I guess there aren't enough 5 or 6 people teams in Gowanus, Brooklyn, looking for office space. But now it's like 20% occupancy. So I'm thinking maybe I start recording in there if it's quiet enough. It definitely looks better than like my kitchen in the background. The wine bottles that I haven't checked to see if that's still good. It got pretty hot in here while I was gone, I assume.
Oh yeah, good point actually.
Don't want to cook your wine.
No, we didn't even remember what we had left here. You know, we got a bunch of fruit because we left kind of like on a whim a little bit.
I know.
And we've got a freezer full of frozen meals because we were like preparing for the apocalypse.
Well, convenient though.
I mean, like in Katrina, like, you know, when I and others left, then it was like then the power went out with refrigerators full of food for 6 months, you know, so it was like coming back and opening like a toxic waste dump. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Yeah. So at least your power stayed on, one assumes, right?
Well, I guess we don't know.
Well, you would know if your refrigerator power had gone off. Yeah.
We had cleared out everything in the fridge, just the freezer. But yeah, I don't know. Nothing is rotting, and I had a couple taquitos yesterday, and those were fine.
What is a taquito?
Heard a taquito? It's like ground beef and some veggies and a corn tortilla that's rolled up, and you buy them in bulk, frozen.
A burrito.
In the toaster oven. No,
no,
because a burrito is a flour tortilla.
So and they're smaller.
Yeah, they're very thin. They're like fingers.
Taquito,
yeah. The next time you're in a 7-Eleven, look at the.
I love 7-Eleven.
They normally have taquitos.
Those are not the taquitos I would recommend.
I have such a strange relationship with my Sev. Like I love my Sev, and I have the app. Sev? Oh yeah, and I have my app, and like I'm pretty sure that I'm the only one that uses the app at the Sev. So like I'll go in and I'll pull up my barcode. And because and then the people behind the register just like look at me baffled, and then so you accumulate points, and so I could get them to scan it. And now they've known me forever, but you know they now know me as the guy in addition to all the other ways in which they know me, but the guy with the app, right? So you can kind of see them like, oh, here, because it's always a thing. It doesn't work seamlessly. But I feel as if I usually have to wait in line behind like people who are buying those tickets, the tickets that they, the lottery or whatever it is. Yeah. And that goes on for like a day and a half. Like people are like, oh, give me 3 of the 14s and 6 of the 9s and let me scratch this with my nickel. And then, oh, I've got $1, I'll take 4. And I'm sitting there just wanting to buy my, not whatever a taquito is. And then so now I feel like, well, if I have to sit there and suffer through X number of hours of watching someone pay their weird, governmental lotto tax, I can get my app that they hit me with all the time. So now I'm the guy with the app. And so I'm very diligent with it. And like, I know my reward cycle. I know like when I get 800 points, that entitles me to a free bag of Sev chips, which are delicious, by the way. Like in terms of like the spectrum of bagged potato chips, the Sev chips are not the worst. And so like so the other day I'm in there and I forget what it's good, but I looked at my app and I was like, oh, I've achieved, level 1 reward, which entitles me to the Sev chip. And so I go up to the thing and I give my app, they scan the app, and then the guy charges me for the Sev chips. And I was like, my man, this thing says I have this is supposed to be free. And he was like, no, you don't have enough points. And I said, yes, I do. He said, there's no way you can have enough points. You have to have at least 1,000 points to get a free bag of chips. So then I pulled the thing, 800 chips, free bag. And then I was like, and he apologized. He was like, oh, I'm sorry. And I was like, you don't have to be sorry. It's a confusing system. I don't, and then, but then we had a nice talk about that. And then I get a thing, an email or text or something from the Sev corporate. And they're like, how was your experience? They give me a net promoter score thing, right? And I always respond. Like, so I'll write a comment usually. And, and usually my comment is 2 lines. You should have 1 line for the people that want to buy the tickets and then 1 line for others. Like, I think that would improve productivity, Matt. They should just have two separate lines, because those people sit there and play the tickets the whole time.
Yes,
when I'm just trying to buy my chips.
That means
I don't think
having another person
Yeah.
on the show.
Exactly.
Or they could time it. There are ways around this, but it's an infuriating system. I love 7-Eleven. So
what do you get at 7-Eleven? I'm trying to imagine you. That's just not a place I would imagine you.
You know what I get?
Not the sushi.
No,
Do they have 7-Eleven sushi?
No. You know what I did find at the Sev, where you couldn't find it anywhere else, because they were open. They were open through the whole quarantine. Flour. Like, you went during that time when everyone was like, I know what I'll do. I'll bake bread. And you just couldn't find flour for anything. The Sev, and they've got Sev branded flour too. So it's like, oh, the Sev, and Lord only knows where it's coming from. Yeah. But no, what I do, and I'm not proud of this. But like, there are times, I know how they've done it. It's all about MSG, right? Which I love. I love MSG. And I've always loved MSG. And like, if you reverse engineer the most delicious snacks, the ones with the highest MSG quota or quotient or whatever amount, is Cool Ranch Doritos. And so there is a time for me, that time is way too often. I'm a generally healthy eater, but like, if I want to just have something really delicious and eat trash, Cool Ranch Doritos. And oftentimes the Sev will confusingly be like, Cool Ranch Doritos are like, I'm not that price sensitive to, like, if someone were to be like, oh, George, how much does a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos cost? Like, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know if it was like 50 cents or $3. Like, I don't know. You
can afford to buy a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos without thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm not that price conscious.
Humble
about, like,
brag.
No. I'm just not that price. Like, I don't know what a bag, a small, and they come in different and odd sizes or whatever. But so they'll
okay, Lucille.
I know, right? How much does a banana cost, Michael? $10. But it's not that. It's like, oh, I have so much money, I can just buy all the Doritos I want. It's like, I mean, okay, so how much? So you all tell me, how much does a bag of Doritos cost?
$2.
Yeah, $2.50.
Okay, what size? That's too much for a little one. $2.50 for a little one.
I don't.
Yeah.
I know a big bag is like $4 at the grocery store.
That's too much money for a big bag. Like, how big is that bag? And that's the
family
other thing
bag.
Yeah.
That's huge. Like, and no good comes of that. If I have a family bag of Doritos in my house, I will eat the entire family bag of Doritos in one setting because of the MSG. Because it's like, oh.
There's no way that the small ones cost less than 99 cents.
Well, good, but there's snack size, and then there's like the double serving bags.
I think the snack size, I don't think is under 99 cents. I don't think you can get anything for.
You can, because at the Sev,
with the app,
with not just with the app, they will have these strange promotions and they're really excruciatingly specific, where it's like, if you buy this particular size of this particular flavor, and it's like 11.8 ounces versus 12.4. Like, you have to bring your drug weighing scale to the Sev to figure out how much but if you get it just right, you can buy one and get one free, but you never know. And I just feel so bad for the poor employees, because it's ultra specific. It's like, it has to be this exact size. It has to be like flaming hot ranch varietal or whatever, so like hunting through the bags was like, is this the one? They don't enjoy me typically coming into the Sev.
I just want to reassure you that it is not elitist to say you can go in and buy a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos without thinking about the price. That's okay.
It's true.
Good. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm not trying to be that guy. It's like, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm super price sensitive to stuff. That's one of the reasons, but like, it's hard to know, because like, if I go down to my other grocery store, then like Doritos, they're like $9 or something. Like, it doesn't seem any. And then my other favorite chain store is CVS, which I also have an app for. And like, apparently CVS has just like massively overstocked on certain items, because like, pistachios are expensive as a rule. Like, I love pistachios, and like, when I'm in my better angels and not eating entire family size bags of MSG Doritos, I'll be like, no, I'm just going to have some pistachios, because apparently you can just eat as many pistachios as you want and it's good for you. And
not true.
And I think it is true. I think it's like avocados or something. Like, you could just eat like 400 avocados in your body.
Not true.
Like, yes. I think it is. I think there are no negative. It's like water or something. Like,
it's good fat, but it's still a huge source of fat, avocados.
Yeah, but that's
water.
Good
if you drink too much, you will throw up.
Well, like, sure. I'm not talking about like being ridiculous.
You said 400 avocados.
Yeah.
Okay, like, you could
infinite amount of pistachios.
No, but you could probably eat 10 avocados in a day, every day, and not gain any weight.
Says the man that thinks eating an apple a day will make you fat.
It will.
You've literally told me an apple a day will make you fat, but apparently I could eat 400 avocados.
Not 400, but 10, I think, if you space it out. If you had two, like, if you woke up at 7 in the morning and had 2 avocados, and then at like 11 C's, you'd had 2 more avocados, and then lunch, you'd have 2 avocados. And then
no, thank you. This diet sounds horrible and filling.
You'd also be malnourished from all the other.
Exactly. Oh, but don't worry, Dan. If you need something different, you can eat an infinite number of pistachios.
It's true, but they're not cheap, right? So like, okay, all right, what does a bag of pistachios cost?
$7. I know, because I've been buying them too. Yeah, I mean, that's what they cost here.
Canadian dollars, which A, isn't real money, and B, no one knows what the conversion rate is.
$7.99 for the smaller bag, $9.99 for slightly larger, and then it goes up to $13.99 for just and it's not that much of a difference. Yeah.
Right, and it's that larger bag, and that's like $14 US around. But apparently, CVS has, like, pre-quarantine or something, they were like, bring us in all the pistachios, because now they're like, buy 1 bag of pistachios, get 14 bags free. Like, they're just like throwing pistachios at you as you walk out, and Pringles too. Like, you can buy one tennis can tube of Pringles, get 14 free.
But I think the biggest rip up, my CVS order is usually dried apricots. And
why?
What do you mean why? They're good.
It makes me. I feel it in the back of my.
You have to get the ones that don't. There's a cheap
Turkish
version that has, I don't know the brands, but there's a cheap version that has way too much added sugar and it's gross. And there's one that it probably still has some added sugar, but not nearly as much. But it's like this little pouch, this little bag, $9. It's wild. And it's I could eat that in one sitting, and it's like 250 calories in the entire bag, and I just paid 900.
Yeah, but it's bad.
900. You're getting ripped off.
900 cents. Yeah.
I think those things are bad for you. I think that's like old
okay, well,
school.
you've just
Definitely better than
yourself
Doritos.
as a health. Yeah.
No, I agree that Doritos are not great for you. I agree.
10
that
avocados
Pringles-
a day. You have lost any authority to give anyone dietary advice.
Okay, well, all right. One avocado versus one of those bags of dried apricots.
Yeah, I don't want to eat an avocado by itself as a snack.
You put some nutritional yeast on it.
Sure.
Delicious.
Okay, so as riveting as it has been to hear all about George's snacking for 20 minutes, I do want to know more about...
Is this part of the podcast? Or...
Yeah, I don't know. That'll be up to you to decide. I want to know more about what it's like to be home. What it feels like in your neighborhood.
I mean, for me, it's not that...
Right, I forgot it's the George hour.
I love... when I was editing last week's episode, which I should upload today. I haven't sent that to you guys. Oh my!
I'm sorry. I just finished the show notes yesterday, like at this time.
It's on me as well. I'll upload that and share it with you guys, but we can put that today. I was editing it, and like the first 10 minutes, I was like, this is just George talking about how he gets his mail and how he throws out all of the flyers, and I was like, yeah, I guess I keep this. Like, it's good. We talk about or not we. George talks about the ROI of mailing.
Yeah, normally there's an opening monologue. Today it's about snacks.
I think George, being a professor, just has this natural, like, okay, time to turn on, go. Where Carly, you and I kind of warm up a little bit.
That's true.
And then we get in right around the 15-minute mark. That's where the magic happens. That's where George has had his monologue, and then he's talked about
we're allowed to get
7-Eleven and MSG, and then
I think the magic begins at second one.
Yes, you
buy the ticket, take the ride. I think we need a thing, like Marin has his WTFers and all that stuff. We need our what's up, E&Ers? What's
Artpreneurs.
Up? Artpreneurs. What's up, E and Artistas?
George, when I suggested that we had some type of dedicated intro, you shut that down immediately. You're like, no, I like how we just do we just do the conversation.
No, but we could put, like, when we do, be like, because I really am excited about and we talked about this during the week, like I'm really excited about having like a Slack channel or whatever. Yes. And I want people to feel like they're E&Ers or
I think Artpreneurs is fine. That's a Twitter handle anyway.
That's a hard one to get out of my mouth. I need like Artistas, or is
no
Sandinistas, art like something.
Sandinistas.
Well, Sandinista is a great clash, right? I mean, there's a whole political thing with Sandinistas, but like we can't do that. But something Istos.
Taquitos.
Taquitos. I bet I'd like them. Like, I don't eat meat, but I bet I'd like them.
They must do a bean version. Look in the frozen section.
So what is it like being home, Dan? Tell us about what it's like to be back in your own space, what the neighborhood is like, what your apartment feels like. Does it feel good, different, the same?
Not the same, that's for sure. So I walked around and I had to go to my office to check on things. It's when I was in Pennsylvania, and then specifically like Republican County, Pennsylvania, people were disregarding masks quite a bit, or just like wearing them around the chin, and I was just like, like that sucks. That's just the nature of the people around here, and there's more space there, so I would go on walks and not wear masks. I wouldn't see anyone. But here, you can't. It's impossible to not end up within 6 feet of someone, every couple blocks. But I'd say like 40% of people around here are not wearing masks. And that's wild to me.
Yeah.
That's and I worry a little bit that there's this kind of false sense of security that like, oh, we're in between waves or something. And
totally.
The second wave is coming, but it's not here yet. So go and party. And I've seen some videos of like bars in Manhattan, people just drinking outside, and it's like a block party to a level that there never would have been like pre-COVID because there were so many cars on the road. So that's a little disappointing. And I don't really feel justified in saying disappointing, because like I've been here for the past 3 months and have lived through what everyone here has lived through. But it's very quiet. It's very weird, but I don't know.
Yeah. Are your neighbors around, or did the people in your building, was there kind of a mass exodus? Most people stayed behind?
No, I mean, people here have lived here for like 20 years.
Yeah.
So I'd say easily half the building is people that have lived here for a decade or so. But there's like 180 apartments in this building. It's definitely quiet. I mean, it's only 2 people per elevator, and so it's an 18-floor building with only 2 elevators, and it's
line.
Yeah, it's
What floor are you on?
11.
Can you take
That's
the stairs?
too many stairs.
I will take the stairs if I'm not carrying anything or stuff when I'm going to the grocery store.
It's a lot of stairs.
Yeah, but luckily, for whatever reason, I would have got myself in the schedule where I wake up unnecessarily early, and so I can go out for the day before people are using the elevator. But it's fine. It's cool. It's quiet. I need to figure out kind of what's legal and what's not, especially with the office, because I don't want to be working from my living room every day. And my office is cleared out nearly completely. I was on a wait list for my private office for months, and now there's private offices open throughout the building. So I don't know, but I've got a lot more time to myself now, and it's not like as it was if I wasn't working. I kind of had to say hi to the parents and be sociable, which I'm glad I had the time to. But now it's Dan time. Now I make my own rules over here.
You're like that the place in Seattle.
Yeah, except mine's just one apartment, the autonomous zone.
In Seattle, or when I think of it, I think of Christiana in Copenhagen, where it's like an autonomous zone there. And, it's interesting to watch that. The mask thing is it's become a political statement too, which is so deeply troubling.
Right, fine, but around here, I mean, I'm sure there are kind of closeted conservatives around here, but for the most part in Brooklyn, people lean left, and so it's when it's even left leaning people that are just not wearing the mask. I think it's I mean, I don't even live in like the young part of Brooklyn. Like I live in one of the waspier neighborhoods, which I'm not psyched about, and it's like all young parents, and so I'm moving in a few months, so I'm excited to be amongst people my age again. But everyone has been through what just happened to New York, and firsthand saw all the disease and deaths, and they're like, we're good now. Like now that Arizona is the place that is getting all the new cases, we're fine. It's just not going to end up well, and we're going to be right back. We're going to have Groundhog Day in like September, October. It's going to be like March.
Yep.
And then it's like, what do you do? It's like, do you publicly shame them? It's because it's dangerous, right?
Yeah. And not very effective either to like, how do you say anything that would resonate? They've made the choice, obviously.
That's interesting. And it's where, I mean, I had a glimmer of optimism earlier this week, where I just felt like, okay, this tyranny of fear and oppression and racism and everything has gone too far and is backfiring, right? And people are now starting to go, wait, that's a bridge too far. And so I took the approach, and I've done this forever. Like, I think it's a good intellectual approach to, if you've got a strong opinion, kind of put out your posit, your thought, your whatever. For me, I typically do that in my Forbes column or whatever, and it's sort of I'd say straw they now, like a straw man, straw person, straw whatever, where it's like, okay, so blow it over. Here's an idea, here's a concept, blow it over. Tell me where I'm wrong. And I've done that forever when writing about business or the music business or whatever. and now I feel like we need to do that with politics. So I've been very vocal on social media in a kind of in a intentionally sort of provocative sense of, okay, here, and just a statement, and tell me where I'm wrong, but do it don't direct message me, do it on the comments or whatever. And it's so interesting to me, and probably, if I'm honest, 80% of it is me just like, there's that just catharsis of vitriol, of just like, I just feel better having screamed. But there's 20% of me that's kind of wanting to draw that out, like wanting to put some, and I'm wide open, by the way, for the reasoned response back. Like if somebody wants to come back at something that I put out, and say, well, George, you're looking at this wrong, and here's some data or whatever to support it. I'm acutely aware of my blind spots, but it's not happening. Instead, what'll happen is people will just sort of direct message me rather than respond in public. What has been somewhat gratifying is those people that do kind of take issue. I don't then have to say a thing. Other people who follow me just kind of swarm on them. And so again, like with the mask, and what do you say to people, and how do you, I don't know, I'm really wrestling with I don't think being, and we've talked about this a lot on this podcast, I don't think being quiet at this point. I mean, I turn to people smarter than I, whether it's Desmond Tutu or Elie Wiesel. You got to take a side. And if you're silent during these times, then you are on the side of the oppressor. So I think there's a way to do it, and I fail at this a lot. There's a way to do it at a higher level of discourse and a lower level of discourse. But sometimes the only appropriate kind of response is, just that very direct approach, and then hoping that others will be direct back at you and talk it through.
It's tough when you're wearing a mask, though, because I think the usual way to show displeasure with someone else's behavior is more to make a face or just
stink eye.
Stink eye.
You can still do that with a mask.
You could also be just like squinting into the sun. You have no. my eyes are not that expressive. I go wide. I go.
Yeah, I'm permanently squinty.
But you can't really get that across the same way with a mask on. So we're.
Well, I have a question for you guys. I don't know if you remember, but we each had a homework assignment talking about, like other people's opinions and broadening your own horizons. Did you guys listen to an episode of Joe Rogan's podcast?
I was thinking about
no, and you know why?
An hour ago, and I was like, oh, I need to do that, and I just kept.
We all said we would.
I know.
No, I did, but until I read your amazing show notes, which I think are I think there's a lot of great things about this podcast, but I love those show notes so much. But you validated my suspicion.
Why? Because he had a tie to supplements?
Mm-hmm. I said that on the thing.
Yeah, but that does. But okay, so you guys didn't do it. Well, I did the homework assignment, which, by the way, I don't know if they all are, but do you guys know that they're 3 hours? I spent 2 days and 3 hours of my life on what I thought was the shared homework assignment. But I have to say that, it's very easy for you, George, to just stay in your opinion. I went through the list of people, and actually, I think his most recent guest now is Bill Burr, who I actually really like and probably would have been entertaining. I didn't know most of his guests. They are largely men, but he had Stephen Dubner, the host of Freakonomics, on there. And I love that podcast and Stephen Dubner's work and the books and everything. And it was interesting because I thought, okay, I know Stephen Dubner's voice. I don't mean like the sound of his voice. I know the things that I know where he kind of lays politically, in terms of economic policy and all of these things. And so I thought maybe it would be interesting to hear the two of them talk. And there are times where you can tell that they are so different in so many ways, but they have a really great discussion. Some of the things, like, it's clear that they're on opposite sides, and they talk about like MMA fighting and UFC and stuff, which Stephen Dubner obviously like just can't really wrap his head around, but they listen to each other. I think it's a good exercise to be more aware of how you listen to people and actually hearing them, not just being quiet and waiting for your turn to speak again. I have to say, I enjoyed the episode. It 2 hours and 45 minutes is like a lot to ask of someone, and I will admit also at the beginning, like he does his own ads, you know, so like, you know, how some podcast people will be like, and this was brought to you by, and it's like his energy is too high and he's swearing a lot. And I was just like, okay, there's no way I'm going to be able to get through this. But they talk about like religion, health, politics. They talk about so many different things. And at the end of it, I have to admit, it was like, and maybe again, it's because I also liked who the guest was. I'm sure there are some episodes that I would be like, no, that was not for me. I think, and that's something that I'm also trying to work harder on, is like, okay, I can say that I'm listening and that I'm open to other perspectives or opinions, but is that true? Am I truly listening? Am I giving space to hear things and absorb them? Again, not just being quiet until I can then speak. I think that you guys should listen to one of his.
I feel genuinely bad that I didn't listen to it. So I know what I'm doing today. Yeah.
I think that. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think you're absolutely right, and you're right to call me out on it. And it's. I was going to listen. I did read a article from the Atlantic from about a year ago that profiled him, which did not make me want to listen to it. You know, because it did ratify my theory that there is this very strong tie to the supplement thing. But I couldn't agree more. And it's something, as I said last week, I'm trying to do more of. And so yeah, once again, reckoning comeuppance for me. I do think there's a line. I do think it goes to the mind stream thing. And I would challenge you back. Okay, so it's one thing to listen to him talk to Stephen Dubner or something. How many of those types of people could you find and listen to in that on his thousands of episodes? Where you know what I mean? Like,
I didn't scroll that far.
I think
I was looking for a familiar name.
He's got a pretty impressive list of.
Yeah.
Well, he's just got thousands of people at this
point.
And good on him, right? Like, and good on the people that go on. So you're both, and Carly, you're absolutely right. And I need to listen to it. I've listened to other things. I was doing other things, and I too feel badly. But it was a conscious choice. Once I read the liner notes from last week's episode, I was like,
which you only saw yesterday. So it means all week you also made the decision. But I think the thing with him as well is you can hear it in what he's saying and how he's saying certain things. I know that there is a whole other group of people who are listening and kind of responding really strongly to some of the other things that he was saying. And like, you know, they talked about gun ownership at one point, and he was giving this argument, you know, like, I know, but then people need to protect their families. And I feel like that's such a weak kind of argument, in the like, oh, well, everyone has to have a gun because you have to protect your family, and then it validates, you know, like stand your ground legislation and all these things, where I think like, I just don't think that more guns equals a safer world. But he's open to discussing these things. He makes actually really eloquent, clearly thought out arguments, and he references people, George, that I think you would be really surprised by, like, and I can't think of any good examples right now, but he's a well-read, articulate person, and I think just shutting down the conversation completely and saying the fact that you had like, he isn't. Yes, he promoted some supplements. It's like a sponsorship deal, but whatever, like, people do that all the time. I don't think that it makes much sense to say, because you got sponsorship money at some point in your career, I refuse to listen to anything that you have to say, and I will just assume that we're on opposite ends. How does that make the conversation progress at all if you aren't even open to it?
You're completely right. I agree. And I mean, this is something I'm working on in myself too. And obviously, the guy's got something, you know, and it's my bias. I equate him with the Rush Limbaughs of the world and the Alex Joneses, and clearly that's inaccurate. So I mean,
He
I'm
came
the
off a
first.
lot smarter than I expected. I was in the same boat. When I was listening back, we were all like, yeah, fuck that guy. And after I listened to it, I thought like, he's educated. He's intelligent for sure. Anyways.
I will do what you did, and and I've done this before. I have been on the fence about listening, and I've scrolled through the episodes looking for someone that I was interested in to hear him talk to him or her, whatever. And so
very few women.
Yeah, that's problematic for me. Mm-hmm. But fair enough.
Yeah.
We did have a listener question.
Hit it.
Yeah.
Pull that up. All right. From Joseph, a Berkeley student by the looks of it. Hey, Carly, George, and Dan. I really appreciate you taking the time to answer your listeners' questions. I've got a couple. Question 1. For non-American artists, would you recommend registering with ASCAP BMI or a local PRO to collect public performance royalties?
Joseph. George, yeah, right. Can I talk about Doritos and MSG instead? The question is, I'm a foreign, say it again, please.
For non-American artists, would you recommend registering with ASCAP BMI or a local PRO to collect public performance royalties?
You need to register. I'm going to write something out on it. I'm not going to give bad information on this. It's a complicated thing. What Joseph is talking about, public performance royalties are money that are paid to songwriters and songwriters alone in the United States rather than performers. So when Dolly Parton writes "I Will Always Love You" and Whitney Houston does a version of it and makes it a hit, and that song is played on the radio in the United States, North Korea, Iraq, and Syria, only Dolly Parton gets paid, not Whitney Houston. In the rest of the world, both Dolly Parton and Whitney Houston get paid. In the United States, in the copyright code, there is no right of so-called public performance for the performer. So because of that, there's no reciprocity. So in other words, if I'm a U.S. artist and I write a song, I will get my right of public performance paid to me in the States. However, if I'm Bono and I write "With or Without You" and that song gets covered in the United States by someone, Bono would get the money, but the performer wouldn't. So because there's no reciprocity, it's created what's known as black box money, where the publishers they collect the societies collect the money and they don't distribute it. So what you want to do is you want to affiliate with a local PRO where you release the song. It gets tricky. You can only affiliate with one PRO. In theory, ASCAP and BMI are supposed to go out and collect from all the other PROs, but it doesn't happen because of what I just said about the breakage. So what you really need is and this is where publishers come into play for artists. And I one of the great misnomers of the music industry is never sell your publishing. That's largely correct, right? Like you don't want to take your catalog of songs and say, here, now I'm selling them to you. You do, however, want to pay or take a percentage of the money that is collected and give that as compensation to what's known as a publishing administrator, who will go out and find that public performance money for you in the various territories around the world. So as I say, it's a complicated question, but in theory, irrespective of where you put your song out, the PROs are supposed to have reciprocal relationships with the other PROs in the other territories. It's Zoe Keaton and I were talking about this, and she's so eloquent, and we both both wanted to use a sort of deprecating word, about the PRs, and she said the system is clunky, which is a really nice euphemism for it. It's clunky is an understatement. It's anachronistic. And it's really, really harmful for artists because there's so much money out there that they're owed that they don't collect. So it's the right question. It's too much for me to go into just right here verbatim, but I'll write something about it. And also it gets into some pretty arcane international copyright law, which is tricky, but it just shows that because there's not, that it can't like sum up the answer to that question in 30 seconds or something. It immediately goes to the information asymmetries. If you know the answer to that question, you can profit from it, and 99.9% of the artists don't. So I'm not articulating well. It's a great question, and one that I'll write on and try to get some clarity.
Great.
It's so interesting to me that the US isn't a part of more global copyright initiatives.
Well, they are. They're two dominant global copyright initiatives, as you say. There's one known as the BERNE convention, which I forget what year, but many years ago, sort of said, look, we globally, anyone who signs this are going to kind of operate the same way. There's also something known as the Treaty of Rome that does the same thing, but the US, as the US is wont to do, picks and chooses the elements of the global things that benefit them. And then the rest of the world's kind of like, wait, what? And so the US didn't opted out of what's known as neighboring rights, which is that what I was talking about, where Dolly Parton would get paid as the writer, but Whitney Houston doesn't get paid as the performer. And as I said, intentionally, the only other countries that have opted out of that are North Korea, Iraq, and Syria. So we're in great company there. So yeah, the U.S. as the leading kind of producer, I assume still today, I could be wrong, of the global consumption of entertainment, is the biggest offender with respect to kind of reciprocity, and it's the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules, and so the U.S. picks and chooses kind of how they want to opt in and opt out. Over time, just like every other kind of institution built on a firmament of unethical behavior or racism, it begins to crumble. And if you look at the state of terrestrial radio in the United States, not going great, right? And so all these things are coming back to haunt them. Just as, I mean, I'm so horrified by my industry, the music industry, with respect to its history of racism, and now even more, it's doing really nothing. I mean, I'm doing what I can, and others are, but the fact that BMG is the only label to stand up and go, yeah, we will actually take a look at our historical contracts during this time of reckoning. Everyone should be doing that, and I think it's an opportunity to talk more about the inequities, inclusive but not limited to the way the U.S. handles these rights of global public performance.
Cool. Question 2. How important would you say is having a band agreement in writing, even when all income is already being split equally between all members?
It's essential, and I have written about this, and I can try to find it. I refer to it as an INTRA band agreement. Here's the issue. So I'm a songwriter, or no, let me do it a different way. I'm in a band. There are 4 of us in a band. I'm the drummer. I don't write the music. I just play I quote air quotes just play the drums. The singer in the band writes the songs, and then the bass player and the guitar player are like the drummer. They're not authors of the songs. They play in the band. And at the beginning, someone brings a song to rehearsal, and you kind of work it up, and as you get popularity, again, and this goes to the first question, the way that the law works. So that band, let's call them the Orchids. The Orchids the singer writes a song for the Orchids. None of the other members are writers on the song. The song becomes a hit because of public performance royalties. When that song is played on the radio, only the singer and writer, let's call him George, gets the money. The other members of the Orchids get nothing, right? And so very quickly the imbalances begin to appear. So all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, George from the Orchids is flying around in his helicopter because he's getting all this public performance and mechanical royalties, whereas the rest of the Orchids are still living in mom's basement or whatever. And so eventually the imbalances go crazy. And what happens is, and bands break up. What happens is that too often the singer goes, okay, I know what I'll do. I'll just give you all a piece of the copyright to the song. That's the wrong move. So now there are 4 people in the Orchids. The singer writes the song. He divides the copyright in quarters, and then bass player from the Orchids quits. Well, when bass player of the Orchids quits, she takes her 25% of the songs that she's been allocated, and you can't get them back. Now she continues to receive that money anytime that song is publicly performed, broadcast on TV, played on the radio, etc. Now you got to get a new bass player. And so what do you give that new bass player? And you end up fractionalizing your copyright so that people who aren't in the band are making more than the people who are in the band. So the right way to do it is to do what's known as an intra-band agreement, where you say, okay, look, I'm the songwriter, but we're going to divide all of the money that comes into this band, including public performance royalties, mechanical royalties, all the things that would normally just go to me, songwriter. I'm going to split it up. Doesn't have to be equally, but in some percentage. And as long as you stay in the band, you get it. Once you leave the band, you don't get it anymore, or you get a sunsetting amount over time. And that way you don't break the copyright, so that you can continue to keep the band going even if members leave, but you incent the members to stay in the band because they're getting part of the earnings. And again, it's anachronistic with our copyright code, where really only the people that write the melody and lyric can get the copyright. I mean, George Harrison, all those amazing guitar riffs, he didn't get any piece of the Beatles copyright. James Jamerson, the great bass player for all those Motown songs, nothing, and that's something that I do hope, and I'm trying personally to address, that we can fractionalize now the income so that, I'm the bass player, I'm the drummer, whatever, I should have a piece of that copyright, and the money should come to me proportionally and directly. It's just not how the system works right now. So you have to kind of have to work within the band to come up with an agreement. In order to do that, you need to set the band up as an LLC or something, because otherwise all the money's coming into one person. That person's got to put it in a bank and pay taxes on it. You need a corporate kind of bank account. And I've written at length on these topics, and I can find it. But intra-band agreements are hugely important. It also goes to things like who owns the name, right? If you're in a band and 1 or 2 people leave, can they take the name? It's why for years I had to clean up trademark issues around the Platters. There were like no fewer than 10 or 12 Platters touring the country at any given time. No original members, because there was no clarity on who owned the name. So those types of deals, and I help artists with them a lot. This leads to an interesting thing also for our fellow E&Ers out there. I think that we should have okay. And then what? Why are you shaking your head?
I can't get behind E&Ers as the name.
Okay, to our fellow whatever Orchids out there, I want us to have. I cannot volunteer you all's time, but I will volunteer my time once a week for a virtual quote office hour, where I shall sit on Zoom or Slack, and if anybody wants to poppity-dop in and say hello and talk about, you have to start that way. You have to, hello, George, is that you? Hello, George, I have a question. Hello, George. And you have to start that way, and then I will answer the question. But they have to do it in old English, sort of a Cockney thing. So all the people that come in, if they happen to be Cockney, that'll be easy for them. Anybody else, no matter where they're from, they have to ask the question during my office hours in a Cockney accent. Hello, George. I have a question for you about how.
Now you're Cockney. You weren't Cockney before.
How
you have to be part of the cast of Faulty Towers in order to ask a question.
Hello, George. tell me more about Net Promoter Score.
And
Hello.
how will you know? How will you know if they're using the accent when they're just typing their question on Slack?
Because you have to type it phonetically.
Office hours. They have to zoom in on me. Yeah. Hello, George.
Well, let's do the. Yeah. All right. Do you want to keep on doing the accent?
I'm serious.
How many times
though.
did you just say hello, George, in the past 2 minutes?
Many.
I'm working through it. But I'm serious though. Like I will put a schedule out there of when people can zoom in and ask me any business, music business, investing type question, whatever. But they have to ask it in a Cockney accent, and I'm going to record it, and then we'll put the answer out.
So let's use the release of this episode to debut the Slack channel. We'll put a link to an invite link in the show notes, and in the email that goes out with this. And if we want it to be, I think we should have a weekly AUA office hours type setup. I wasn't going to suggest we do that on Zoom and just hang out on Zoom for 3 hours, but I was thinking just Slack to start. But
no, but they can't do the accent.
They can send in voice notes.
Yes.
Actually, why can't I just like, if I'm just like doing my business, why can't I just have my Zoom thing on? If anybody shows up, hello, George, and then if they don't, then I'll just do my thing.
Because I know how busy you are and how much, if you're not on the phone already on a Zoom, you're pacing around your house on the other side of the house, like staring at your guitar with the Zoom on. If you do that during calls, I can only imagine that like that times 10 is what's happening when you're not on a Zoom call.
I'm doing it though. I'm gonna find some time. And
the kind of times we've been on a Zoom and you're like, hey, do you mind if I just make bread while we're having this conversation? Turn the faucet on full blast.
I try to mute I try to remember to mute myself, but sometimes I do realize, I was just using the food processor while I was just crushing ice while I was on. Well, I'm going to do it. I'm going to find, because there are times, there are gaps.
Well, yeah, and we can, if no one shows up, we can just hang out and talk.
We don't all have to. No, I want it just to be me.
Just you? Knock yourself out, George.
No, you all can have your own. You can have your own ones too. Your office hours. You don't have to. Well, all three of us are like. You can have Carly's office hour, Dan's office hour, and I'll have mine. And mine will be all in Cockney.
I hope people show up. I hope you can.
It's gonna be awesome because it'll be some poor person just like, hi, Professor Howard, talking Cockney.
Yeah, you have to talk in Cockney as well.
Yeah.
Do I have? Yes, you do. Okay.
Cockney questions with George. Yeah.
That'll make it so much better for everyone.
For you.
Yeah, for you only.
No, because it'll make them less nervous. Like
it will make them more nervous to even ask a question if they know that they have to ask it in a ridiculous accent.
All right, George,
let's practice.
You have your office hours. Carly and I will hold our own, and people can speak in whatever their native accent.
Yeah.
Can we practice? Dan or Carly, can you ask me a question in Cockney?
No.
This is the issue.
Yeah.
Carly loves these types of games so much. One of my favorite Carly jokes is there's an old Dean Martin joke where he says, the joke goes, a grasshopper walks into a bar and he says, the bar, can you tell it, Carly?
Mm-mm.
Grasshopper walks into a bar to order a drink, and the bartender says, "Oh, we have a drink named after you." The grasshopper looks at the bartender and says, "Oh, you have a drink named Marvin Schwartzman?"
Dan's reaction is
and that's like, it's one of my favorite jokes of all time. But my favorite thing to do is to make Carly try to tell that joke, because the joke is the making up of the name. Do you get the joke, Dan?
Yeah, I get the joke.
Can you tell it? Tell it back at me.
I'm not telling it back to
But you have to make up a different name.
It's too much pressure for a joke. I don't like the joke.
You want me to make a name? I'll make up a name.
But you have to do it in the context of the joke.
Francis Beazle butt. I don't know.
You see how hard it is? Francis Beazle butt is awesome. That's awesome.
That was good.
That's really good. But like when you're in, so I love doing that with Carly, because she can't do it. Like she
I don't know. There's something that blocks me from it. She'll
like when she's like she'll get like to the punchline. Oh, so your name is, and then I can't do it.
It's too much pressure.
She can't come up with Francis Beetlebutt.
No, I can't. I really can't. But my favorite part is when you told me that joke the first time, you said,
I screwed it up.
What did you say? You realized
a cricket.
Yeah, a cricket walks into a bar, and I was like, okay. And then I was like thinking, like, there's no drink called cricket. Am I like, this whole joke is nonsense. Like the joke is just a weird name because a random insect was in a bar. I was like, what? I mean, grasshopper, okay, and then it started to make more sense, but now the request has become too big. He expects No, the request is too big. George is also really great at like putting terrible jokes in your head and forcing you to retell them in public situations. Another one that is not safe for work that we won't discuss on this particular episode.
I remember a time when this podcast was about helping creatives understand business and helping business people think more creatively. Now it's here's bad jokes from George in a Cockney accent.
It's a good joke, A. B, it does help you think creatively. C, I'm offered up my valuable time for people to call in and talk, and I'm trying to make it a more pleasant experience for them and make it not so like, I have a question, but and if I think that by making them talk in a Cockney accent, that will make it easier for them.
Well, there's only one way to find out. We let the data speak for itself. Carly and I will accept questions in writing.
I will not.
Is that how people come to you, like in your office hours at Berkeley? It
doesn't go well a lot, and I try, like, because it's, as you say, I'm busy, and then like the thing is like, oh, Professor Howard, I've got this idea. Can I get some office hours? And like, I love my students more than anything, and so like I'm always eager to talk to them, but I want to use their time efficiently and my time. So I asked them in advance to write out just like a one-page thing that I can look at before they come, because I think a lot of times people, and this is fair and valid, and they just sort of want to brainstorm through the idea, but like I don't have time. I don't have time. It's not the most effective use of either of our time to do that. So office hours can be a little tricky, and it's also bad because there's typically just sort of like a line, and so people are feeling like they have to rush through their thoughts, and I don't like that. And so that's why I think, and for me, so much of it is like, I know that just the dynamic can be awkward and intimidating. I'm old, I have a deep voice, whatever. So there's a bit of method to my madness. Obviously, if somebody called, I'm not going to make them do the whole thing in a Cockney accent.
But also, you just not prove my point, but writing something out, it can lead to three possible outcomes. One is you just figure out how to say what your question is. The other two are you realize you can Google the answer, or you already know the answer, or three, you realize maybe it's not a great question, and when you write it out, it's like, is this really?
No, that's why I do that. But like I don't. I'm always trying to straddle that line, encouragement and accountability, right? Mm-hmm. Like I always want to encourage my students, like take that idea, but then the accountability is you can't. It's and again, it sounds like super selfish. Like I keep saying, like, don't waste my time. I don't really care about, I mean, I care about, it's like, don't waste your time. Don't be sloppy intellectual. Like, just as you say, like, if you can Google something, if you like, just because this idea floats into your head doesn't necessarily merit, sitting down, talking through something. Like, there should be a little bit of legwork in advance. So much of my teaching, so much of my classes, so much of my work in business is trying to help people filter through ideas that float into their head into a more productive way. I mean, and there are lots of ways you can do it. And to your point, one of the very first things I tell people is get it out of your head and onto paper. Because when ideas are in your head, rattling around there, and I think this is very human, they seem perfect and they almost become security blankets. I know for me personally, I'll have ideas for businesses or whatever in my head that I kind of use as like, well, when my life completely falls apart, at least I can fall back on that thing, right? And but that's a lie, right? It's just, you need to get that out of your head and then poke holes in it, and then keep fleshing it out. While it stays in your head, it stays sort of perfect. So it's no ideas are perfect. It's getting it out there. And so it's not like when I ask my students or colleagues or whatever to write something out before we have that conversation. It's to that point exactly. It's not just about, oh, my time's so precious, I need to go buy more Doritos and MSG. It's about, like, I think that process will help you, and then it'll help us have a much more productive kind of time together. And that's all I want, is the productivity.
Here's another idea. Practice saying your idea or question in a Cockney accent, and if it sounds ridiculous, then maybe you need to work on the idea. Or maybe you've got a really bad Cockney accent.
Yeah.
Sounds ridiculous anyway.
I'm not 100% sure I know what a Cockney accent is. I think of it as like in I just had like Dick Van Dyke from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, or no, the other one, the woman who Pippi Longstocking. No, who's the woman? A Spoonful of Sugar.
Mary Poppins.
That's it. Mm. But anyway, no. But look, there's a bit of a method to my madness. I think business and entrepreneurship and talking about it, it needs to be fun. It needs to, like, there needs to be the spirit of I hate it when people use this word, but I'm using it, like, play, of like if you can get that, if you feel excited in a dopamine, if you feel like you can so much, I think humor is a proxy for intelligence. I think funny people tend to be smart people, and so if you can sit and banter with someone, like, ideas, it's a work doesn't have to be this, like, Sisyphus pushing this boulder up a hill. I mean, one of the things, Dan, I like about, working with some of the people who we work with, like, we laugh a lot on those calls, I mean, so, like, and I think that's good. I think that's, like, too often business, you tense up, and it's like in anything, like, in playing an instrument, like, when you're tense, you don't play well, like, I remember when I was first learning guitar, my teacher would make me, like, drop my hand, like, relax. And so I find humor, and, like, that can relax people. And then you get closer to that flow state, and you say something, and some of it's just nonsense, but in that nonsense and that spirit of play, like, kernels of really important ideas come out. And life is also just better. Like we're on our phones or on our whatever, and, like, this is serious shit, and we've got stakeholders and accountability, but let's laugh every once in a while. Like, it, and I know I often in job circumstances I'm like the court jester, and some of the times that's just intentional, because I feel like if I can make people laugh on a conference call, it can change the dynamic. It goes from being accusatory and stuff to, like, okay, we're all just people here. Let's express and articulate and laugh at ourselves too. I mean, I'm the first one to laugh at my nonsense. I mean, not like, oh, I'm so funny, but laugh at my foibles,
A bit above.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe when people submit questions, we should ask them to submit a joke as well.
I want them to tell the grasshopper joke.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what I mean? Like, I mean,
yeah, I know exactly.
Totally.
And then I think it's like the spirit, and you're right, Dan, this podcast is supposed to be about helping people, but, like, it's, it's got to be fun for us too.
But that was also me just teasing you guys about going down that rabbit hole. But you're right. I mean, but also whenever it's why you're a good teacher too, because you do have fun with it, right? Where if it was just dry, here's the lecture, here are the definitions, students wouldn't retain it as well. Whereas if you tell it with kind of your charisma and your humor, it's more memorable.
And my students are funny, and we're funny people, and like those moments, like I find laughter intimate. Like I find like it's bonding, like when you can laugh with people and take some of your defenses down, and like it's so humanizing in this political world. I mean, I'm so antithetical, so diametrically opposed to certain people in my life with respect to politics and stuff. I just hunger for those moments where we can just laugh together and put, and it's true of business too. Like it's hard. A lot of the work that we have to do is deadly serious. People have their savings on, but like being able to just kind of laugh and depressurize that pressure cooker allows for more. I'm always trying to balance that because it can be so brutal. Yeah, it's not just teaching, but like if you're not laughing through your day with your work, maybe you should question what you're doing. It's just drudgery. Life is got to, particularly now. And I feel guilty laughing sometimes because I mean the state of the world or whatever, but the alternative is just misery. Who wants that? I mean, I think of MCA, who I love so much, and he said his favorite part of the Buddha, he was just like, yeah, he's funny, like the Buddha's just a funny dude. I'm sorry, the Dalai Lama. MCA met the Dalai Lama. He's like, the best thing about him is just really funny.
All right.
So what have we worked on?
There we go. I'll go. Yesterday or this morning, I don't remember when, I published part 4 of the Remote Musician's Handbook. Granted, It's been available in the PDF form since April. But part 4 is kind of a hypothetical. Here's this artist, and she wants to adopt a lot of the practices that I suggested in the handbook. How would she go about it, and how could artists that are reading it use that as a jumping off point to start doing things like live streaming, recurring revenue, all these things that should become part of what being an artist is, the kind of regular content output as well as monetizable actions outside of putting a song up on Spotify. Just how do you get started, or how do you take, especially for, I think we talked about it last week, there's going to be a bit of a reckoning for every single artist in the world that relies solely on streaming income, or primarily on streaming income and touring, both of which are largely irregular events. To say, all right, I need to come up with a model where I'm making more recurring, regular income from content that I put out, membership type stuff. How do you shift your traditional artist business model into something that is more in line with I keep on saying new media creator. I don't love that.
I love that though. New media entrepreneur. That came out of last week's podcast.
Yeah, I think it's smart.
I do too. Are you bothered by that phrase or that term?
I'm not bothered by it. It feels, I think part of it is a lot of this stuff is not new. It's just new for musicians.
But yeah, I mean, I remember back in the day in the 90s, like record labels would have a new media department. And at that point it meant like the internet, but
what's your the last class I took with you about creative promotion and new media? Is that
new media? Yeah. Creative promotion through new media. Look, I mean, it's all clunky, but the spirit of it is that artist is entrepreneur, and not forewalling that as artist is singer songwriter, artist is musician. It's that, and Carly did find the link to that in the show notes about my article about how managers need to focus on business development. Yeah, new media feels a little anachronistic right now, but
it's what it is.
it's what it is, whatever that new media might be coming out, you know.
Well, that's the thing. If by new media, it's an evergreen term that adopts whatever is new at the time, because YouTube is going to be old media at some point.
It is already, and I think, yeah, compared to like a TikTok or something, and so I think like another theme that comes through all these podcasts is it's that mindset. It's keeping that kind of mindset of, well, I'm not going to just dismiss some new potentiality just because it's new, right?
Well, I know I was thinking, cause this is something I want to write kind of ongoing about as not necessarily a series, but an ongoing theme. And so I was looking at just other types of media and how, you know, what else is as irregular as music releases, right? It's movies, so actors, right? But if you are an actor that is in movies that are coming out, regularly but irregularly, if that makes sense, you always have a project going on. You don't need to worry about this, but every up and coming actor, like, what are you going to do? Just take small roles in irregularly released films and rely on those to build your career? I look at comedians right now. They're so great with TikTok and YouTube because they will do bit like Sarah Cooper is an example, right? Trevor Wallace is this dude. My friend told me about him, he watched this guy's YouTube shows, and then I came across him on TikTok and ended up going to one of his stand-ups. And this guy is building a legitimate comedy career using his skits on TikTok and YouTube to tour nationally, maybe internationally. And you don't have to be represented by, WME or something. You can do whatever, although Sarah Cooper is now. But
she just signed a deal,
but this is the point. It's, you should not have to rely on other parties with a lot of leverage to make a living.
That's right. And I think, when you're talking about actors, a lot of actors at lots of stages of their career do voiceover stuff for commercials and things. I mean, they are looking for other ways to, and I think artists, musicians need to get into that mindset too.
Ben Schwartz just built a little voiceover studio in his closet.
He's great, and I think artists, there's a bit of a, I'm working on actually a piece about Echo Kids and about how they are not just providing, a job to be done or a service for the kids that are learning music, but also for musicians to have another supplemental income source. And teaching's obviously been something, but they're now completely new and less stigmatized ways to kind of make money through teaching. I mean, still to this day, I've been begging Johnny Marr for decades to, like, please do a book showing how to play those insane guitar parts. And no, I will not. But like other people will. And so I love this thread of the podcast where it's like, well, you're a creative entrepreneur. Your main medium happens to be music, but what else can you tie it to? Like, animation studios right now are desperate for music, and that's not something that, because they haven't been shut down as badly as some of the others. So just getting the music out there, I think it's a really good thread. I'm so glad that handbook is finally out. What's next?
Writing more about what we were just talking about. Yeah, I think that's, I want to profile some of these people, but I think it can turn into an ongoing,
I love that.
Not just in practice, but kind of more prescriptive. Here are ways to break out of the release cycle being the only driving force behind your business.
So important, man. What a great mission, because it's applicable to any artist, and not just artists. I mean, I'm always, musicians or whatever, canary in a coal mine. Like, the days of just like anybody having kind of one job are kind of over. Like, everybody, I hate this term, but everybody's got some kind of side hustle or another. And I think it's the purpose, not product. Like, it's okay if your side hustles or your whatever, if they line up from, if they kind of stem from an overarching purpose, it'll all be okay and it'll all be fun. But if it's like, well, I'm just doing this because I've got to grind it out, it's not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Carly,
what you write about?
Well, I will just need to reshare that personas piece with you guys because I wanted to get that out. I'll get that out this week, the follow-up. I want you guys to feedback on that.
Yeah, I'm so excited for that. And I really, really want that to be, maybe that's the next kind of handbook type thing that we do. I love
like
that.
this model. Yeah. Well, it's
me too.
Based kind of on your blockchain book.
The blockchain book, the TuneCore book. Yeah, but it's a good model because it keeps it, you know, we start with a thesis, put it out there, then talk to others, refine it, and then test it. Here's some examples.
I mean, HBR does it, right? I mean, all of their books of 10 articles on leadership or whatever.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. HBR. But yes, it is. I really like it, and I love. For me, it's something I've been doing in a vacuum. So the idea to be able to share it with you all, and hopefully with listeners and other people. Like I want to give T-shirts away, give away copies of my book or whatever to people that are sending us in through Twitter, through whatever. Hey, I wrote this. I promise I'll retweet it. I'll stick it out there, whether that's a song, a business piece. You know, I really want to encourage people around that. All the orchids out there.
The platters.
Can't do that.
I think artpreneurs is so easy. It's not that hard to say. Come on, it's our Twitter handle. I mean, it's a play on our the name of this podcast.
It makes your tongue go too far in the back of your mouth.
Artpreneur.
Only the N.
Artpreneur.
And that's like middle of your palate. There's no L.
It sounds like I'm talking and I'm deaf. Artpreneur.
But you're just try saying it normally.
Say it with a Cockney accent.
Entrepreneur.
Right? Beautiful.
All right. Hello, fellow entrepreneurs. What have you written about? What are the three things?
Who wants to get started? I feel like I often go first. I'm not going to end on a very super happy note, though, so maybe I go second.
You want to go second? All right, George went first last time. I'll go first this time. Three things. First, I have a podcast that I really enjoyed. Boom Bust HQ Trivia.
Oh, I started listening to that too, about HQ Trivia. Yeah. Yesterday, I started listening to that.
Clearly, the three of us are in a little bit of a bubble with mapping interests. But yeah, it chronicles the rise and fall of HQ Trivia and the founders, selling Vine and then creating HQ Trivia. And it's got.
How far into it are you?
I'm caught up.
Oh, okay. I've only listened to the first two episodes. Don't say too much.
It's 5 episodes, but yeah, well, it's chronicling everything. I think they've got some great people that they were able to interview, like Scott Rogowski, right? And he plays a very central role in how it built. And they've got designers from the team as well as journalists like Taylor Lorenz and I'm blanking on the other woman who was at Digiday, I think, and is now at CNN. Carrie Flynn. She's great. But yeah, I just love stuff like that chronicle.
It is good.
And there's another one. I don't think it's by The Ringer. It's by Wondery on WeWork, which is a very similar type of thing.
Yeah, I want to listen to that one too. Yeah.
I think it's called We Crash or something like that. It's super clever. I'll have to find it. But that's one of them. There's 5 episodes now, so that's a good binge-worthy thing. Second one, when I came back to my apartment and opened my mailbox for the first time in 3 months after USPS failed to forward my mail, I'm glad they were able to deliver the mail forwarding notice to my Brooklyn thing saying, yes, we have received your notice and we will start forwarding it to Pennsylvania. No, they didn't. And it's like a P.O. box in the lobby of my building. It's like that size and it goes pretty deep. It was just stuffed full. But like 2 years ago, I had ordered this book before it was written called Objects in the Mirror by one of my favorite singer-songwriters, this dude named Stephen Kellogg. And I just kind of forgotten about it. So it was I don't think it was a Kickstarter, but he was doing that type of pre-order thing online. And I'm a huge fan of this dude, and I'm really excited to read his book because he's had such an interesting life of, you know, certainly not having the success that he thought he was going to have. And I weirdly like a lot of those stories. I find that very endearing, and that's one of the reasons why I like the Damn Wells or my friend Julian Villard. It's all these incredible artists that, to go back to a term we used a lot on a few episodes ago, never found the right product market fit, right? And so they never kind of had that. They all saw this early success of getting signed to major labels, and it felt like they were going to be the next Ryan Adams or something, or the next whoever, and then didn't. And I think Steven is really interesting because you think of an artist, and he's still successful. He still makes his career only with music, and he's written songs for some larger artists, and he still goes on tour, and he still has I'm sure, if you look at the average revenue per fan of his, or annual average revenue per fan of his fan base, it's higher than most artists. So he does things like family, like weekend trips with his fans, where everyone shows up and it's like a big flag day for a weekend with his fans and their families.
Horrible.
It's what he turned into a family man. He married his high school sweetheart, had 4 kids, and his parents divorced when he was very young. So it's kind of an interesting, you don't normally hear that story, but that's what his music ended up turning into. So he ended up writing more about his life as a family man that spends a lot of time on the road, and every time a kid is born, he writes a song for one of his daughters. They're all his daughters. So it's called Objects in the Mirror: Thoughts on a Perfect Life from an Imperfect Person. And
I love that.
Excited to read it.
Yeah, that's a really nice.
Sounds amazing.
My third thing is Todoist, which is
I know Todoist.
Yeah, and so I've this is like the douchiest way to describe what I'm trying to build, but it's just how a productivity stack. It's getting the right apps together that can all kind of work in tandem. And I was using Monday.com for all of my working with one of my employees and trying to organize projects. And it's good for that, but I was trying to use it also just for my like to-do list of work stuff. And it's like taking a bulldozer to push over an anthill. It's way too much. And so I was using Reminders on Apple, and I think that's a really bad app. I'm really disappointed by the Reminders app. And Todoist kind of filled that gap for me, and I really like it. And so that's slowly figuring out. I feel like I'm always changing apps, but it's feeling more like an engine rather than all these different places I have to go to do things that are interrelated.
You should chronicle this. That's what my first blog was productivity and creativity and productivity, and it was just trying to find those. I wrote, so I've used Todoist. I'm the same way. Like I struggle with, I've actually hacked Reminders into something that I can sort of work with, but it's not great. But Things and OmniFocus and all of these different ones, they're hard to get one to kind of glom onto. That's cool. I've used Todoist. I don't think I'd go back to it, but I'd love to read kind of about your productivity stack, all the different ones that you're working.
Yeah, I've got what I need to fit in Notion. I need to get Notion to do the
Notion.
things I want it to do.
I've been playing around with that too. Yeah.
It's one of those things that can do everything, but you need to. There's a learning curve.
Yeah. There's definitely a learning curve.
People build websites on it. It's just wild.
I know. And Rome. I mean, you can kind of see where it's headed. But did you get this from Machine Gun Kelly?
No, this one was just an organic. I had heard of Todoist, and it came up in my app recommendations a million times. So it's also really low on the, I don't know if it's the productivity rankings. It's like 126, but I see
it's been around for a long time.
Yeah. But it's a very clean app, and it does what I need it to do. So I'm happy.
Dig it.
Carly.
So my first thing, I wanted to be finished by today. I will finish it today. I'm trying to read a book a week right now. And I wanted to be finished at this point, but I'm reading White Fragility right now, Robin DiAngelo's book. And actually, I just saw today that she has, I don't know if it was always there, but there's a free reading guide available on her website for those that maybe you're interested but don't want to commit to the book. But I would also just really recommend the book. The chapter that I'm on right now is called White Women's Tears. And I think I mean, these kind of discussions, we obviously spent a lot of time talking about the BLM movement and protests. For me, I want to make sure that this just becomes like a permanent part of my own learning and homework. I want to incorporate these kind of lessons and tools and books. And the book it's great. It's really great. And I mean, like her work, she does kind of like diversity training in companies. And so the stories that she reads, like you can't help but cringe. But as someone who understands the power of words and language and loves it, she puts things really clearly. Like one of the things that resonated with me the most is she talks about how we talk about different events and things. And she uses Jackie Robinson as an example. And she says, people refer to him as the first African-American professional baseball player. But if you actually wanted to describe that accurately, you would say Jackie Robinson is the first African-American man that was allowed to play baseball, or that white men allowed to play baseball. And you never say things like that. Or she talks about, the women's suffrage movement. It's like that gave white women the right to vote. African American women actually didn't have the right to vote until the civil rights movement in the 60s. And so and again, that was because white men allowed white women to vote. And so it's changing how you view and say these things. And she talks a lot about like the good bad binary that white people have with racism. You're bad if you're a racist, and you're good if you're not racist. And so white people have a really hard time. Like one of the worst things that you can call a white person is a racist. And she says, like, it's impossible as a white person to not be racist. You are born and raised in a white supremacy system. Like everything has been designed to benefit you as a white person, whether you're aware of it or not. And so I'm also trying to think about ways in which I can say, and I feel comfortable, it's not a thing that I want to say, but that's kind of the whole point of this. I, of course, have racist tendencies, thoughts. Like it's a thing, we always try to equate it with something really intentional racism, and that's just not what a lot of racism looks like. And if we as white people can't say, I of course have racist parts of me because I've been conditioned in that way, you have to at first call it out to actually break it down. And there's really interesting stuff about, how to actually take feedback when it comes to talking about race. And in this particular chapter, it's like when she said, I took a photo of it. It's like when a white woman cries, a black man suffers. And just like how we react to racism. And I think as a white woman, there's a lot of work that I have to do. So I'll finish that book today, but I have no qualms recommending it before I'm finished it. And I'll include the link to the free reading guide. Amazing. If there's anyone that wants to just like dip their toes into it, I think, I think it's really important, and it's great. It's really good to just change the conversations in the way that you talk about it.
Wow.
My second thing, sorry?
That was just amazing. Just that whole, not just, I mean, the book sounds amazing, but just the way that you talked about it there, and the vulnerability and honesty with what that was amazing.
I think that it should be required reading. I really do. I think it's not a very long book and it's easy to read, but she lays things out in such a way where these things, but I don't know, maybe it's just like the words that she uses or the clarity in which she talks about them, but we have to, you talk about accountability. It's like, we just have to take accountability. These systems, I mean, I'm blind to it because I live in a world where the systems have been designed to benefit me. And so it's just, and she talks also about this like color blindness that a lot of white people claim to have and how dangerous that is. Like, you can't not see race. If you don't, anyone that claims to be colorblind is like one of the worst offenders, because it's a thing that exists. I mean, it's something that we've created. But anyway, so I think that it should be required reading. And I think in my own life, it's also giving me things that kind of really tactically that I can do. And I'm going to start rephrasing things and not saying, the first African-American to do this. I think it's really important to add that disclaimer. It was the first African-American person that was allowed to do this. Yeah, he wasn't the first good baseball player, like it's none of that is accurate. And so anyway, so yes, that is for sure a huge recommendation on my part. And then the second one, I referenced it, but actually I hadn't been listening to the Freakonomics podcast much lately. And after listening to Joe Rogan, then I went back and kind of and was listening to Freakonomics as well. And I do really, really like Stephen Dubner's work, and particularly when I was doing all that work with the Nobel economists, he and his co-author, they just speak about economics in such a like clear English way, but he approaches really interesting topics through the economics lens. And it's not the most recent, but episode 420, which jobs will come back and when, they're looking at the massive job loss that's happened because of COVID. And like when it's a two-part thing. This is the first of two. They look at the jobs that are lost and all of the jobs that just will not come back. And he also looks at different policies that have been enacted at different times. And there's this one policy called Ban the Box, which removed the checkbox on job applications where you would say, like, have you ever been in prison? And so you would check the box, yes or no. And there was a push to remove that box because the idea was that it would give former prisoners a better chance to get hired or get further in the hiring process. That box, while it was supposed to be like an equal employment thing, was limiting them. But then when they removed that box, the unintended consequences that Black and Hispanic men, their employment rates dropped. And so there's kind of literature and proof now that by removing that box, it allowed employers to just kind of like maintain their own biases. Well, if I can no longer ask that, I can safely assume that more Black men have been in prison, and so I will just hire less Black men. And so now it's like this unintended consequence. And so he looks at policies and kind of the effects that they've done. But I think this whole aspect of, there's obviously a lot of discussion around a push to defund the police and talking about mass incarceration. But I think looking at the kind of decarceration and how to get people back in the workforce is a really interesting part of it. And so it's like Corona, but race relations and economic policy. It's a great episode. The second one is also, it talks more about like reopening the economy, and Andrew Wang is interviewed on that, well, like UBI and stuff like that. But the first one I think is really, really great and is one of the reasons why I love that podcast so much. And then my third thing is Dave Chappelle's 846 special.
I watched that.
I just checked before we had this call. It's at like over 16 million views already. And I think I would call it's like more of a speech than a special.
Yeah.
And like it opens up with people getting their temperatures checked and sitting at a socially distanced space from each other, and everyone's wearing their masks. And of course there's a few jokes in there, but it's just a really kind of poignant perspective of what's going on. And I also found it interesting because he talks about like the push for celebrities to speak up. And we talked about it, George, with the whole like Imagine thing and how tone deaf it was. And he just kind of summarizes, I think, his stand and his perspective so beautifully on it. It's like he says, like, I'm comfortable being in the back seat. Like, the generation that is driving right now is the one that should be. But he also kind of ties his own life to some of these things, like numerically. I mean, obviously 846 is the number of minutes that George Floyd had his neck knelt upon by a white man. But he talks about like Kobe Bryant's birthday. And I think it's a thing that you hear a lot too, like after Trayvon Martin was killed, like Frank Ocean singing about like, he looks just like me. And I think that there's this mirroring effect that Dave Chappelle really expresses really eloquently and beautifully. And so it's like about half an hour. Anyone that hasn't watched it, I think definitely should. And that's my third thing.
Yeah, I just watched that the other night, and one of these times we're going to have the same ones between us.
I was
I found
actually
it,
wondering about that. Yeah.
yeah, I found it truly remarkable. I mean, I kind of missed the time when he was super popular, when his show was on. I just was so busy. I was, so and I've always been fans, not the right word, just admired his work, and but like, that, yeah. I mean, you said I don't really have anything to add except for if you haven't watched it, watch it, because and and it's not a stand. I mean, it is only like a half an hour, and it's in, I guess, at his house in Ohio or wherever, and like people just kind of, but it's,
In
man,
some
oh
kind of
man,
field. I don't know where.
yeah, it was so
outside.
so good, so good. Hard to follow those. My gosh.
I didn't want to end. I feel like all of mine were a little bit heavy, but
Can I
What do you
just
got,
talk in a
George?
Cockney accent for a while more?
Do the whole thing in a Cockney accent. It's your three things.
No, no, I can't. I'm embarrassed about my Cockney accent. I'm embarrassed about my three things. I have to
no.
reorder them. Well, they go from trivial to not trivial, so maybe that's okay. So, as hopefully we're perhaps nearing at least stage one of the end, where we're not just sort of locked up. I'm reflecting back on what I've kind of learned, and then this is a very light thing, but just like things that I don't think I would have done otherwise, just because I my life is structured so that I'm on an airplane all the time and I just don't have time. But so I've gotten pretty darn good at pour over coffee, and it's like one of these rituals that I really really love in the morning. It takes me about 15 minutes to go from start to finish on it, so it's not the type of thing you can just like, you have to kind of make the time for it, and I love it. And then for me and the way my brain works, like I have to refine and tune and test, and then yesterday morning I was so happy because I don't ever get to do much coding these days. I just bought Henry a C++ coding book, so he and I are going to do some together. But the closest I get to it these days is coding together. Coding's not the right word, but making shortcut apps, and which is code. I mean, it's they just make it's like building blocks of coding. But so I hacked together. I improved. I built a little early version of a pour over timer shortcut, and then yesterday I just built this really detailed granular, and it just threw me back to like when I was actually writing code, and just like that learning new things and then trying to chronicle it and then make something that other people can then use to, because like pour over coffee for me at least was really intimidating. I didn't know what I was doing 2 months ago or whatever, and I'll never forget, like the first cup I made was just it was undrinkable, and but now like with this app that I've written, like I feel like anybody that uses the little shortcut could make a decent cup of pour over coffee. So that's been fun, and again, something that I just don't see myself ever having the time to do that absent quarantine. The second one is the movie called Babylon, which came out originally in 1980, directed by Franco Rosso, and it takes place in South London, like Brixton, and it's the story of two competing Rastafarian sound systems, reggae sound systems, like they have a battle. It's unbelievable, and like when it first came out, it went to Cannes and got all sorts of awards or whatever, but it was deemed to be too controversial. It never had a U.S. theatrical debut until 2019, and because like when it was showed in London, people tore the seats up and stuff, and it was just very inflammatory culturally. But it provides this picture of sort of Thatcher's London and for me at least, like I'd argue that the Clash is the greatest rock and roll band of all time, and like the whole, it shows the nexus between reggae and punk rock and the Clash, and the music's in it just so great. Like what's the dude the main guy is blank on his name. Oh, it's a Warrior Change by Aswad. So he's in it, like the Brinsley Ford, who plays the character, from in the movie, but he is the guy from Aswad, and the songs there. So if you don't know like kind of the history of sound systems and the way that they made this creative art in absolutely the worst period of time, this is a great movie, and it's so cinema verite. Like you can't believe it's a work of fiction. It feels like the films of like Mike Lee, or it feels like Scorsese's Mean Streets, but about dub. So I just absolutely love it. The third thing is my new favorite book that was given to me by Carly, called Funny Weather: Art in an Emergency by Olivia Lang, and it had arrived, and I just started really pouring through it last night. It's just great. It profiles, it's a series of her interviews and profiles of people, but Basquiat, Georgia O'Keeffe, and then it touched my heart so much because I think I've talked about Arthur Russell on this podcast, the cellist, and she does a whole piece on it. I don't think I've ever seen anybody write on Arthur Russell before. So it's a great book about kind of the power of art for empathy and an emergency, and it's essays going back a ways. It's not all new, but it couldn't be more timely. So it's a really great book, and I'm awful grateful to you for sending it to me, Carl. Thank you. But yeah, those are my three things.
Awesome.
Cool. This I was going to say this was one of our shorter episodes, but it's not. An hour.
Very Joe Rogan of us.
You can cut
we're not
out,
even close to Joe Rogan.
Cut out 30 minutes of me just talking in a Cockney accent about Doritos.
We're keeping the Doritos.
Okay. But I do want to do the office hours, and I do hope people come to them, and I do want to get the Slack channel started up and people sharing things, and I will do office hours, and I am going to implore people to do it in a Cockney accent.
Awesome.
Perfect.
All right then. Goodbye. All right.